Kashyapa. The learned Brahmana Kashyapa said, Prayatyat, because of the pollution, Atmana, of the mind, Te, your, Doshat, because of defilement, Muhurtikat, in terms of the moment, Uta, also, Mat, my, Nidesha, direction, Aticharena, being too neglectful, Devanam, of the demigods, Cha, also, Atihelanat, being too apathetic. You may notice, if you listen to Prabhupada's lectures, that he would let the chanting of the slokas go on for quite some time. And he'd encourage as many devotees as possible to chant. And in various places, Prabhupada he said, actually, we should learn all these verses. And so, like all the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam, all the 800 verses in the Gita, he'd want us to learn all of them. So that's one of the reasons he would let the chanting go on for some time. The translation, the learned Kashyapa said, because of your minds being polluted. Now there's 4 things here that Kashyapa mentions, so see if you can remember them. I'll ask you what they are after the translation. Because of your minds being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, and because of your being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious. So what are the 4? Okay, so the first one was pollution of mind, yeah? Mahurtikat, what does that mean? Dosha and Mahurtikat. What does dosha mean? Huh? Dosha means fault. What's that verse? Nidhi Rajan Asti Hekamahan. There's that verse. There's this ocean of faults. Dosha Nidhi means like this age is an ocean of faults. So Mahurtikat means time. So it's because of the fault of the time. And what was the next one? The third one? Being neglectful of what? What do you say? Mat. He says, because of my instructions, because you neglected my instructions. And the fourth one? What does Deva mean? Demigod. Yeah, apathetic. Thank you. Apathetic to the demigods. This is if you ever listen to Bhujana Prabhu's lectures, you'll notice that he always is saying, now listen carefully, I'm going to ask you questions. So what this causes us to listen. Yeah? So it's a really good technique to use, is if you want devotees to listen to things, you just say, I'm going to ask you a question. And it's quite a classic sort of teacher sort of a thing. And we see here that he's talking about these 4 particular things, and we'll explain these. They're significant. We'll explain these a bit more later on. So, responsively, please. The learned Kashyapa said, responsively, please, because of your minds being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, and because of your being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious. So he's a bit annoyed. He's sort of ticking her off a bit. Purport. The conditions for having good progeny in society are that the husband should be disciplined in religious and regulative principles, and the wife should be faithful to the husband. In Bhagavad Gita 7:11, it is said, anyone know 7:11? It's not the shop down the road. What's Bhagavad Gita 7:11? Without looking at the Gita. There's a particular line in there that's well known. Kamo smi bhatara shabha, that I am sex life which is according to religious principles. Yeah? So that's the point that Prabhupada is making here. In Bhagavad Gita 7:11, it is said that sexual intercourse, according to religious principles, is a representation of Krishna consciousness. So an important point here, that if one is having sex in a religious manner, it's Krishna conscious. Because normally we talk about meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit sex as being irreligious principles. But if it's done in Krishna consciousness, then it's actually a religious principle. Very, very important. Before engaging in sexual intercourse, both the husband and the wife must consider their mental condition, the particular time, the husband's direction, and obedience to the demigods. So 4 things: the mental condition, what their mind's like at that particular point in time, because we see, as is being pointed out by Kashyapa, because her mind was polluted with lusty desires, therefore this was not a good thing. And then he talks about the particular time. Very, very important, to do it at an auspicious occasion, an auspicious time. And then he also mentions the husband's direction, because we see that Diti ignored Kashyapa Muni's direction. And Kashyapa Muni, as Srila Prabhupada says here in the beginning of the purport, the husband should be disciplined in religious and regulative principles. So he was directing her according to religious principles. Not that he was saying, oh, we should do this because I'm going to enjoy it. He's saying, no, this won't be an auspicious time. We should follow the religious principles. And the last point he mentions here, Prabhupada mentions here, is an obedience to the demigods. Because Kashyapa was also expressing to Aditi that actually, that this would be disrespectful to Lord Shiva, because this is the time Lord Shiva is wandering about, during the twilight time. And therefore this would be disrespectful to him. So, he was understanding all the criteria that are there for having good progeny, and Deity, because she was prompted by lusty desires or motivated by lusty desires, disregarded all of these things. And so as a result, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were born. And we'll just continue on this. It's a really interesting purport, this. According to Vedic society, there is a suitable auspicious time for sex life, which is called the time for garbhodhana. Diti neglected all the principles of scriptural injunction, and therefore, although she was anxious for auspicious children, she was informed that her children would not be worthy to be sons of a Brahmana, because Kashyapa is a Brahmana. There is a clear indication herein that a Brahmana's son is not always a Brahmana. Personalities like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu were actually born of Brahmanas, but they were not accepted as Brahmanas because their fathers did not follow the regular principles for their birth. Such children are called demons or Rakshasas. There were only 1 or 2 Rakshasas in previous ages due to negligence of the disciplinary methods, but during the age of Kali, there is no discipline in sex life. So essentially, Prabhupada is saying in this age, everyone's a demon or a Rakshasa, because there is no observance of religious principles. And we can see that in this age, so many people are motivated by inauspicious desires or aspirations to gain things which are not going to help them in the spiritual life. They have nothing to do with spiritual life. They're after meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, gambling. This is the whole motivation. And how can I increase my position in this material world? Krishna describes it very nicely in the 16th chapter of the Gita, where he talks about the 16th chapter of the Gita is the divine and demoniac, and he talks there about the divine consciousness and demoniac consciousness. So he mentions, he says, Ishwaraham aham bhogi siroham balavam sukhi. He says, this is the mentality of the demon, is Ishwaraham, that I am the controller. Aham bhogi, I am the enjoyer. That I am powerful, I am happy, sukhi. And this person, he's my enemy, I will kill him, as I've killed these ones in the past. And we see this is very much the mentality of this world. If you look at, there's always wars. I mean, if you look at the last, at least during our lives, right, there's always a war going on somewhere in the world. There's never a time when there's not a war of some. Of course, only the ones that kind of like people think are important get reported in the press. But in Syria, in Yemen, and all these places, there's been wars going on for years. And it's all about one person or one group of people trying to impose their will upon someone else, or one group of people trying to steal something from someone else, or trying to take something that's not theirs. And that's, what's going on constantly. And there's always some kind of calamity in this material world as a result of this negative consciousness, of this irreligious consciousness. There's always some calamity. And Prabhupada would often say, he said, don't be surprised if there's calamity in this material world. Why? Because this material world is the place where people come to forget about Krishna. This is the material world. This material world is the place where people come to engage in simple activities. People don't come here to become pure devotees of Krishna, unless they are a pure devotee of Krishna and they come with this mood to deliver the fallen conditioned souls. People come here to forget Krishna. Therefore, and I was listening to a lecture last night, a Bhagavad Gita lecture. Prabhupada was giving in Germany, somewhere in the second chapter of the Gita. And there was, a group of devotees there, and there was some children there as well. And one of the children started to cry. And Prabhupada, he made the point, he said, everything in this material world is duality. So there's the positive side, because the child's very beautiful, there's, become a devotee of Krishna, but then there's the negative side, the child cries. And so everything's like that in this material world. It's mixed. But in the spiritual world, everything is eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. It's a very different situation. And this is being demonstrated here, how, especially in this age, we see that every living entity, practically speaking, has got this independent spirit, where they want to be separate from Krishna, where they want to enjoy separate from Krishna, where they want to forget about Krishna. And we see, if you go out and do book distribution, for instance, or you meet people on the street, if you tell them you're not that body, you're a servant of Krishna, what's their response? You're crazy. Of course I'm this body. What else do you think I am? They have no perception of the self. They think that this is me. Yet, just through simple logic, you don't even have to get philosophical, through simple logic, it's easy to understand that you can't possibly be this body. Because just look at the body, going from childhood, from baby to child to boy to youth to old age, we see that the body is changing. And dramatically changing. Like if you take it from when you were 6 months old to when you're 65 years old or 85 years old, you can see there's such a substantial difference. So how can that be you? Because we see that we remain the same as we age. Our consciousness, basically our likes and dislikes, and maybe some kind of evolution as we go on, but generally speaking, we see we remain the same. Like when I was young, I didn't like guavas. When I'm a youth, I don't like guavas, and I still don't like guavas. It's just some things are like that. But we see that the body is changing. So even on simple logic, it's easy to convince people. But they're very, very foolish, and they don't understand these things very easily. And sometimes you see that even you can explain things to them very clearly, but they refuse to accept that they're very obstinate. They just want to cling on to these these preconceived notions they have of reality, even though it may seem. And I was just reflecting on this the other day. Could you just imagine what it would be like, if we were, to come to this movement with no preconceived notions of reality? How easy would it be to become Krishna conscious? But because we have these conditionings, of what I am, what this world is about, what spiritual life is about, we've got all these preconceived notions. These are obstacles for our spiritual evolution. And as long as we cling on to these, and you'll see that even after years and years and years of practicing devotional service, we still cling on to these preconceived ideas, which are just so wrong in comparison to what's being presented to us in the scriptures, or so opposite of what's being presented to us in the scriptures. Because generally speaking, we find all these preconceived notions are based on the bodily concept of life, and also based on our observation of what's happening. But then, if you try to understand things a little bit more deeply, you can understand how much can we actually perceive with our material senses. Just like here we are sitting in this room, and it's full of air. Can anyone see the air? Can you feel the air? Can you taste the air? No, you can't. But we accept that there's air there, because why, we've been told it's like this, it's like that. And sometimes you can see the symptoms of air. Like it was very cold, for instance, you'd see condensation coming out of your mouth when you breathe. Or if the wind was blowing, you'd feel the air moving across your skin. Or if there's sometimes, I remember when we did the Abhishek for the Panchatattva, when the deities were installed, at one point we used this, what they call Pancha Pushpa, which is it's just a liquid that's distilled from different flower essences. And so we bathed the deities in Pancha Pushpa, and it's really, really fragrant. And when we did that, the fragrance just wafted out into the temple room, and all the devotees, smelt this, and you could see their reactions when they smelt this fragrance. So, the air sometimes becomes, coloured with fragrances, and then we can perceive that. But it's not that the air has a smell; the air is carrying the smell. So, we can sometimes see the symptoms, but we can't actually see the air. So in the same way, with the soul, Krishna explains the soul is like you can't actually perceive the soul directly with material senses, but you can perceive the soul through the symptoms. Just like, that you can look at a body. If you've ever seen a dead body, you know what it is. It's just like a lump of matter, basically, and it's arranged in a particular way. I mean, I've had the opportunity to see many, dead human bodies, and it's like, in one sense, it doesn't look that different. All the components are still there, but you can see this is a dead body. There's no life force there. You can see the difference. So we can see when the living entity is within the body, you can see the symptoms of the living entity. You can't see the living entity. You can see that there's consciousness there. There's the ability to interact. There's the ability to perceive things. And also, they interact with each other. They talk. Whatever, exchange. Ideas, etc., etc. And so you can see the symptoms of life within the body. And according to how the consciousness is evolved, then the symptoms manifest in different ways. Like if you look at, for instance, a worm, right? The life symptoms of a worm are very, very unevolved. Basically it just moves its way through the soil looking for food. There's not much evidence of it talking with people and stuff like that, or you don't hear about worms reading the Bhagavad Gita, for instance. I mean, you might find bookworms will eat the Bhagavad Gita, but they might not read it. And they'll probably get benefit from eating it too, because it's transcendental. But they don't really have that perception or that capacity to read something or to digest transcendental knowledge. And then you'll see as living entities, you go through the different species, as they become more evolved, then the symptoms of life are more manifest, or the symptoms of the jiva are more manifest, and they're able to do more and more things. And then when you come to the human species, of course, many living entities in the human species are actually less than animals in the way they conduct themselves. And you see that, especially in a big city like Sydney, in the modern age. I mean, some of the activities that people indulge in is less than what animals do. They do things that even animals don't do. So you can see their consciousness is very, very, very unevolved. So it means what will happen it says yam yam vapi smaram bhavam, whatever state of being a person achieves in this life, that state they achieve in the next life without fail. So if they have a consciousness is less than that of a dog, that's where they're going in their next life. Yeah. But the idea is especially, and this point is made in the Hitopadesh. This is a haranita by Maitaram Chasamanyan Eta Pashapi Samana. So it says the activity of ahara by eating, sleeping, mating, defending, are common to both men and animals. This is Pashapi Samana. Samana, it's the same. They have these common. And there's thank you. Dharmo hi adhiko. Yeah, Dharmo hi adhiko vishesha. What's the last line? Daimina pashubi samana. That, but the difference, the adhiko vishesha. Vishesha means special, and there's like the one special quality of a human is dharma. But if they don't take the dharma, pashubi samana, they're just an animal. So this is meant to be the point of human life, is to take the dharma, to actually practice the activities of dharma. Why? So we can understand who we are. We can understand we're a servant of Krishna. Now, in different ages, that dharma manifests differently. But in this age, we see the dharma is manifesting in a particular way. And it's a very relishable way. It's a very easy to perform way. And Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda. And we see the results come very quickly. So then Prabhupada says, how then can one expect good children? Certainly, unwanted children cannot be a source of happiness in society, but through the Krishna consciousness movement, they can be raised to the human standard by chanting the holy name of God. So we see that in this age, because they don't practice dharma, pashubi samana, they're the same as animals. Yeah? That is the unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya to human society. So this is what Lord Chaitanya has given us, is that through the process of Krishna consciousness, especially through the process of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we can go from being an animal to becoming actually a human being. Now, of course, we find so many people walking around and thinking they're very, very elevated, sophisticated, etc. like this. But we see that Narottam Das Thakur, in one of his bhajans, he points out that actually they're just two-legged animals. And we can understand that from the Shastras as saying, if their business is simply eating, sleeping, mating, defending, Rishabh Devi also points out it's available. This same level of sense gratification is available to the hogs and dogs that eat stool. So if that's what you're doing, if you're just doing activities just the same as a hog and a dog, what makes you think you're any better? Because you're doing the same things they're doing. But this is not what human life is meant for. Human life is meant for understanding the self. Human life is meant for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engaging in a process that helps to nourish that realization. So it's very important that we understand this philosophy very deeply, and also we can see here how it's describing, very scientific actually. If you look in the third canto, the chapter 30 and chapter 31, very interesting in relation to this discussion. Chapter 30 talks about what happens to a person when they engage in sinful activities and how they go down to all these various hellish planets. And it's quite a graphic description of what happens, for a criminal or a sinful person. And then it talks about how when they enter into the womb, in chapter, like chapter 30 talks about the punishment they go through if they're sinful. Then in chapter 31 it talks about when the jiva enters into the womb, the experience they have in great detail. And it also mentions about like the uncomfortable position, or how when the semen emulsifies with the female egg, the egg in the female, and then it starts to grow, and how on different times what sort of changes are there as the body grows. And then it talks about then the child gains consciousness after, I can't remember how many months it was. The child becomes aware of its situation, and then it's aware of the burning of the mother's digestion. So when the mother eats certain things, the digestion gets hotter, so the child gets burnt from that. It talks about how the worms are in there and eating the child. And the child, it says if someone's very fortunate in this position of the womb, they start to realize they're suffering. And this, how this is a horrible condition. And then so they start to pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, please, my Lord, please just let me always think of you. And when I come out of here, please just let me remember you. And then as this meditation evolves, then the child starts to think, no, I don't want to come out because there's a horrible place out there. I don't want to come out to the material world. I just want to stay here and think of you. And at that point, they're pushed out by the heirs of partition, patuition. So it describes very graphically the situation in the womb. And here we see also how Kashyapa is describing to a deity, because of your consciousness at the moment of procreation, because it being an inauspicious time, because you didn't follow my instructions, and because you disrespected the demigods. Therefore, you will have children who are, the first point she makes, who will be, they'll have wicked minds, they'll be very cruel-minded. And then also because of the time, because the time where we had this twilight time goes for 2 katikas. I'm not sure exactly how long a katika is, but there's different things, Muhurta, katika, all these different types, alava, all these different types of measurements of time. So because this time went for 2 katikas, then you'll have 2 children. And because you didn't follow my instructions, because his instructions, as I was saying, they were very dharmic, his instructions, he was presenting dharma, then they will be opposed to the laws of dharma. And then because you disregard or you're apathetic towards the devatas, therefore they will be opposed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur describes it like this. So it's very, very scientific. You can see he's saying, because of this, and this, your children will be like that. So it's not random. And this is the point that's being brought out. And this is why it's really important to try and study this philosophy deeply and understand. It's not a random thing. You just go out and have sex and you're going to have a great child. No. The consciousness, and this is the point being made also in the Bhagavad Gita. There's 2 really interesting verses in the 8th chapter where it says, Antikala charame smara mukvikalevaram. I can't remember these verses exactly, but I'll just read them to you. They're very interesting. The first one is, Antikala charame smara mukvikalevaram ya prayati smarbhavam yati nasyati sangsaya. And whoever at the end of life quits his body remembering me alone, at once obtains of my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So if we come to the point in our life where we get to the end of our life and we remember Krishna, that's where we're going to go. Just like we see there's that, how's that verse go? Those who remember the Devatas, they go to the planets of the Devatas. Those who remember the ghosts and spirits, they go to the planet of the ghosts and spirits. But those who worship me, they will live with me. So Krishna is explaining, Arjuna, how to determine where you're going to go. It's just like, if you get in your car, right, you've got a GPS, and you program the GPS, 180 Falcon Street, push the button. Where do you go? You go to 180 Falcon Street, to come to see Radha Gopinath. But if you program, somewhere in King's Cross, I don't know what King's Cross is like these days, but I know what it used to be like. If you program your GPS to take you somewhere in King's Cross, you know where you're going to wind up, in a place of ill repute. So in the same way, the consciousness is a little bit like a GPS. If you program your consciousness, to always be thinking of Krishna, and Krishna says, "Satatantam kitiyanto mam yatantas chajirapataha," that always thinking of me, engaging in my devotional service, talking about me, stuff like this. These great souls are always, engaged in my service. So if we develop that consciousness where we're always thinking of Krishna, that's where we're going to go. Our GPS becomes programmed to go to Krishna. But if we're always thinking of other activities, that's where we're going to wind up. So your destination is entirely up to you. Your future is literally in your hands. It's not down to anyone else. No one else can take you back to Godhead. You know, it's like there's that story where Dhruva, you can see the end of the pastimes of Dhruva in the fourth canto. Fourth canto, I think? Third canto? Yeah. Anyhow, so we see that when the spiritual airplane came to take Dhruva back to the spiritual world, he asked the Vishnu Dutas, well, what about my mother? And then they pointed out that she was going back because his mother was like a guru for him. She guided him on the path of bhakti and told him to go and seek the Supreme Person of Godhead. So the Vishnu Dutas pointed that his mother was actually going on another airplane back to the spiritual world. So Prabhupada uses that story to highlight you have to fly your own plane. Huh? No one else can do it for you. No one else is going to make you Krishna conscious. Can't be done. It's not. And Prabhupada often would talk. There's a well-known story or well-known example in the Mayavadi school about Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. So it talks about how Vivekananda, when he surrendered to Ramakrishna, that Ramakrishna touched his head, and it was like he got electrical surcharge. He passed out, and when he came to, he was enlightened. Prabhupada says this is a load of rubbish. It doesn't happen like that. No, you actually have to apply yourself to the practice of Krishna consciousness. In rare cases, Krishna can do things like that, but it's quite rare. Even we see with Dhruva Maharaj that he performed tapasya for thousands of years. Stood on his tippy toe and performed tapasya. And then Krishna, when he came, or Vishnu when he came, he touched him with his lotus. Then he became enlivened. But through his tapasya, he actually became enlightened. So you actually have to endeavor. And then so in the next verse Krishna mentions here, he says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam chajet yante kalayevaram tang tang evati kuntaya sata tad bhava bhavata. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So Krishna's informing us here, it's like it's up to us. Whatever state, he says whatever, yam yam vapi smaram. Smaram means to remember. The vapi means the form. Whatever state of, actually, hang on, I got this word wrong. Va'api at all. Okay, it's two words, not one word, va'api. So it says smaram bhavam. So smara means to remember, and bhava means nature. So whatever nature you attain or remember at the point of death, that's where you go in your next life. So as Krishna explains elsewhere in the Gita, that those who meditate on the ghosts and spirits, that's where they go. Those who meditate on the ancestors, that's where they go. Those who meditate or absorb themselves in the Devatas, that's where they go. But those who meditate on me, always think of me, that's where they come to me. So this is the point of Krishna consciousness. It is like, and this is the way to achieve success in Krishna consciousness, by always being absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage to me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this, Krishna says in the 18th chapter. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. So he's giving this instruction to Arjuna, but the point of the Gita, it's not for Arjuna, it's for us. So Krishna is giving these instructions to Arjuna in the Gita for our benefit. So he's saying, if you always think of me, you become my devotee, you worship me, you offer your homage to me, you will come to me without fail, Krishna says. So it's a simple process, but it requires determination. It requires application. It's a very simple process. I mean, the fact that we're here, indicates it's a simple process. I mean, I know myself. If things are too difficult, I'll just give up. Like sometimes you're working on the computer and something's too difficult, you just go find someone else to do it. It's too difficult. So the fact is that Krishna consciousness is a simple process. But you just have to apply yourself to it. You have to be determined to see it through to the end. And you'll achieve the goal. Krishna says, asangsayam samagramyam yatikasastas. Without a doubt, you'll achieve the goal if you apply yourself to the process. And so we can see here what's happened with Diti is because of her actions at the point of conception, she wound up, even though she had a desire to have auspicious children, that's one thing. But the desire has to line up with the actions. It's no good, having an auspicious desire but engaging in sinful activities. It's like, drinking alcohol and thinking, well, maybe I'll become a devotee or something like that in the future or whatever. No, because your actions are going to determine what happens to you. So you need to align your actions with your desires. If you want to become a devotee of Krishna, if you want to go back home to Godhead, you must align your actions with your desires, and then you will achieve the destination you seek. It's a very simple process. We just need to apply ourselves. And of course, we need to apply ourselves under the guidance of qualified persons. We can't just make up our own kind of idea and just go ahead and do whatever we think. Because we see that's what's happening in this world. Is people, their guru is their own mind. This is the guru in this age, is the mind and also the one-eyed guru. You know what the one-eyed guru is? The television. That's the one-eyed guru. Everyone, practically speaking, watches television. And anything they hear on television, I saw it on the TV, it must be true. And these people, the press and the politicians, their expertise is lying. So how can you believe anything they say? The politicians, you look at any of these politicians. There's an election coming up this year, isn't it? I think there's an election. I'm not saying to follow them or anything like that, but you listen to what these politicians say. They'll promise you this, they'll promise you that, they'll promise you so many things. And what do they deliver? Nothing. And every year it's the same thing. Promise after promise after promise. And delivery is zero. All they do is they promise you whatever they can for one particular reason, to stay in the job. They're attached to the money, they're attached to the power. So they'll say anything they have to say. I remember there was a previous election here, and one of the politicians was going around. He was making all sorts of wild, far-out promises, And he didn't actually get in, but you kind of knew that he wasn't going to deliver on any of it. But he was just saying anything. Like people were saying, "Oh, what about this? Oh, yep. When we get in office, we'll do this and this and this." People were coming up asking the most ridiculous things, and he's promising it. So that's what they do, and the press are the same. They do exactly the same thing. They just fill you with misinformation. So if you believe any of this stuff, you'll be misguided. But the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Devotion, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because this is being presented by personalities who are not subject to the defects of a conditioned living entity, therefore we can understand this is perfect knowledge. And the purpose of this knowledge is not to get your money, is not to enjoy your body. The purpose of this knowledge is to deliver you back to the lotus feet of Krishna. So when we follow such pure knowledge, such perfect knowledge, then we actually have the potential to achieve God realization and return to the spiritual world. All right, well, I'll finish it there. Any questions at all? Well, that's Manaji.
On the point you made about how everybody, especially in this age, has their own worldview, and therefore everybody's worldview is different. In the spiritual world, there's one worldview, Krishna's worldview. I was thinking, it's one thing when you go out on food distribution to see different people's different worldviews and different ways of living. But it's another thing when you go into, for example, our families, you have a family of six different worldviews in your family. And it's very difficult to make them and not be disturbed or pulled or arguments and so on. So is this like the real space for actually consciousness that we can go into, especially
Yeah.
If we go in and we find ourselves drawn into the old is that a reflection of our own Krishna consciousness? Should we be able to go into those situations with 600 devotees and just do our best and leave without
Yeah. Yeah. There's an interesting saying in Poland. If you have 10 people in the room, you'll have 11 opinions. Because they all have the opinion that they share, they keep to themselves, but when they're talking to others, they'll have it like they might agree on an opinion, but actually they hold a different opinion themselves. And that's what it's like in this material world, is there's so many opinions. But what opinion matters is Krishna's opinion. And that's what he says. He says, Matahasma, he says, this is my opinion. And so that's what really matters, is Krishna's opinion. Why? Because he's the only person who really knows. So, we can see, like sometimes, I think part of it is also learning to respect others' position, even though you don't agree with it. And sometimes when you're having a conversation, like, if people don't respect each other's opinion, generally they wind up getting into arguments. Okay, we accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God, others may not accept that. Okay, but that's not your perspective. I respect that. I don't agree with it. So I think part of it is not trying to be a right fighter, not trying to establish ourselves as being right all the time. Because, if you're in a situation where someone wants to hear or someone wants to learn about Krishna consciousness, okay, you can present to them. But oftentimes with a family, especially when you're dealing with your parents, because you're their child, you're their baby. What do you know about life? I've taught you everything you know. So you can't. And I remember with my mother, I used to try to convince her. When I first started practicing, convince her about Krishna consciousness, and she just pushed back on it. She used to say things like, you don't come around here dressed like that, don't shave your head, all that sort of stuff. But then, in the end, I just gave up on that and just tried to be a good son. And then at one point she told me, actually, of all my sons, you're the best. So just not by telling her about Krishna consciousness, which would be the best thing for her, but just by trying to be a good person and to help her to appreciate the benefits of bhakti, even though she herself may not take to it, but at least to have a favorable disposition, which ultimately is agyata sukriti, which means in her next life, or in this life, she may have got the opportunity to take to bhakti, or in her next life. So I think there's no point trying to establish your view as being supreme, because that's what everyone else is trying to do, and that doesn't work, because it just winds up in argument. So if we can, first off, is respect the other person. Respect, okay, they may be bewildered, they may be deluded, but I respect them as a living entity. I respect their right to have an opinion. I don't agree with it because it's wrong, but I'm not going to try and force my opinion down their throat. Because the thing is like, if you try to force feed someone, then generally the result is indigestion. So the expertise of a preacher, and I'm not saying I have this by any means, but I can see with some devotees when they present Krishna consciousness, they're able to present it in such a way that it becomes palatable. And this is the Sukha Mukha in the third verse of the Bhagavatam, how this Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam, how Sukadeva Goswami he's described as being a parrot, and there's this analogy is given there. It's just like when a bird is feeding its young, right? It'll take the food, it'll chew on it, and it's this expression of semi-soft and almost solid. So it's not liquid, it's not solid, but it's very, very digestible. So the analogy is given how Sukadeva Goswami, he's taken the Bhagavatam and he's digested it in a way and then represented it in a way that makes it very palatable and easy for us to understand. So that's the trick, is to learn how to. We have to realize the knowledge, because if we just regurgitate the knowledge, it may not necessarily hit the point. So if we can digest the knowledge ourselves and understand it, and Krishna makes that point to Arjuna in the Gita, he says, please try to understand this so others will take it seriously. So if we have realization, and if we are able to conduct ourselves in such a way that it affects people's hearts, and if we're able to present the knowledge in such a way that it affects people's hearts, then we can be successful. But if we're just trying to get in there and sort of dominate with our opinion, or just try and sort of push our views on people, generally you got to have a degree of detachment, I guess. You've got to let go of like being right. And in this world, I mean, most people are right fighters. They always, I'm right, It's like there's this TV psychologist type of guy in the USA, and sometimes he does these tours where he goes and does shows in big stadiums and arenas and halls and stuff like that. And so he was doing one in Canada, and I actually listened to it. I thought it was really interesting, the way he did this exercise. And so he set up an exercise where he had people pair up, thousands of people. And first off, he started it off by saying, like, okay, so you turn to your partner and you say, I'm right. And then the other one responds, no, you're wrong, I'm right. And so you go back and forwards like this and see what happens. And so, they asked a few people, and said, we just got into an argument. And then, okay. And he said, did you notice something really interesting? No. What was the topic? There was no topic, and they got into an argument. Yeah? But then they tried the same exercise, and he said, now what you do is you say, I respect your point of view, but here's my point of view. So it's just the same scenario, it's just a different way of approaching it. So I think it's really important, and Kapila Dev talks about this, how respecting every living entity, this is like a basic principle of human life. It is to learn how to respect every living entity. But in this society, they don't respect anyone except themselves. And sometimes they don't even respect themselves. Actually, most of the time, people don't even respect themselves. And the proof of that is they kill living entities to eat them, to eat their bodies. How can that be a sign of respect? How can you say you respect others when you're eating their bodies? You're killing them, you're putting them through such suffering just to gratify your tongue. So, yeah, I mean, you can see in this world that there's very little respect. They talk about it, and you'll see, like, at a superficial level, there is respect. But as soon as there's some aggravation, some tension, some, threat, all that just goes out the window, and you'll see the real nature. You can understand the real nature of a person when they're under pressure. You'll see, like, sometimes with devotees, they can be under, let's just say, with the GBC meetings, for instance, Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj was the previous chairman. And my experience of Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj is he's always a gentleman in every circumstance. And we see, like, sometimes the topics were getting there's some very intense topics going on. It's every year it's like that with the GBC. But he always calm, cool, collected. So you can understand his nature. That's him. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected, he's very respectful in all circumstances. So you can understand a person's nature by what they're like when they get under pressure. So that's, we have to work on cultivating our God consciousness. Anything else at all? Yes? Yeah. Yeah, we'll find that as Kali Yuga progresses, we're fortunate we live in a country like Australia, but that'll change. That'll change. As Kali Yuga progresses, they'll see us as a threat. Well, I think it's the third time this has happened. I got sent some videos. I haven't looked at the videos yet. But it may be because it's political. It's a political thing. It's just like something else is going on in the country. I remember talking to a devotee after the last time it happened, and he explained the political sort of circumstances. There's something else going on in the country, so they blame the Hindus. It's just the Hindu kind of Muslim tension sort of thing. But they'll blame the Hindus, and because I can't remember the exact detail of it, but something happened at a political level, and it was the Hindu thing versus Muslim thing, and they just manifest it like that. And it's the same wherever you go in the world. There's always some underlying tension. So if you aggravate people in a particular way, you may experience something like that. Maybe not attacking and burning the temple or whatever, but something can happen. Like it happened, was it in Fiji a few years ago? Quite a few years ago now, where the temple was attacked and burnt. I think it was in Lautoka. So these things happen. The nature of being in the material world. So it just gives us a message. Don't give up preaching. Give up the material world. Get out as quick as you can. And Mahaprabhu would say that this material world is not a fit place for a gentleman, and someone who's intelligent will finish their business and get out as quick as they can. So that's the message there. At least I think that's the message there. And of course, be careful in your preaching. Don't be confrontational towards people, especially people who have the potential to be violent. Sometimes you have to be a little bit careful who you approach on the street. I've had experiences myself on the street where you sort of present a book to someone, they just hit you really hard on the hand. It's really painful, So you have to be a little bit intelligent. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bo, Hare Krishna.